Hello, everyone. Jerry Jones here with Jerry Jones Direct, and this is the Jerry Jones Direct podcast and radio show. If you're watching this, you're seeing a video version. If you're listening, you've got the audio version. And today I have an extra special guest with me, Dr. Roger Levin with the Levin Group. And gosh, I don't even know where to start. I mean, to properly introduce Dr. Levin would probably take a good 45 minutes. If you've been around dentistry for any length of time, you know who he is. You've probably read his columns back in dental economics or some other publication, but he's published 66 books, working on 67 at the moment. I mean, gee whiz, where do we start on that? So I guess I won't get too deep into the introduction. Doctor, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you. We've had a lot of fun already, just in the pre-call or the introduction to this. We've had a lot of fun and just discovering the commonalities we have and what we think is going on in dentistry. So welcome to the show. Glad to have you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and I want to thank you, Jerry. I've been looking forward to this and thinking about it, and I hope we can give some great information to your listeners that will benefit them in their practice and their lives.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it one bit. So in our introduction, we'll just dive right in. In our introduction, you were talking to me about the data center that Levin Group has, and 36 years of practice management data, and that's really unrivaled. I had at one point 15 years of data from my own office, but it was certainly not an amalgamation of dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of offices. And so I can't imagine the value that brings to what you do to help dentists. And so I'd like to spend some time on the data and what that looks like and what trends you might be seeing. And then we're going to get into some other topics. For example, like why 2019 is the best growth year you've seen in 36 years. What some of the factors are influencing that opportunity. And then we'll get into, sort of the methodology that your group has to improve practices. And I'm sure we're going to get off on a tangent or two as well. So let's start with the data center. Do you want to start there? Does that sound good?
Sure. So as you know, I'm a general dentist, third generation. I did practice full-time for 10 years and started the company along the way. And in the 1980s, business went through a revolution. If anybody's old enough to remember, Japan was becoming the major economic power. A lot of industries in the United States were poor quality, like our car industry. So Japan was selling cars here, and everything you learned about business then was coming out of Japan. Because when you study business, you learn about whoever's hot in the era when you're studying it.
Yeah.
And a lot of data. And I realized early on that if I was going to build a consulting firm in my vision, we needed real numbers, real data behind the work we were doing. Mm-hmm. Up until then, there were a lot of great consulting firms and consultants, I guess. We were one of the early ones. But I have a joke that in the 1980s, you could stand outside of a practice, stare real hard at it, and it would grow. That's all it took. And that's because, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, along the way, dentistry was not about dentists, and I'm one of them, having brilliant business insights. We learn nothing about business in dental school. We think we're good at it because we did well, but it was really an economic supply and demand factor with a low supply, high demand, where everybody does well. And then you say to yourself, I must be really good at business because I'm doing well. So early on, and I remember I'm going back to, software like ACT you may have never heard of.
Oh yeah, I've heard of ACT, yeah.
You heard of, well, a lot of your listeners may have never heard of it. But we started collecting data. And as we collected data, and I love data, data's essential to build the models, to put together the systems that we then put into client practices and measure the results so that you really know how you're doing. And as we started collecting data, I also started with my group to see trends and patterns that gave us, I think, tremendous insight that we never would have had without looking at the data. So we collect data from clients, we collect it from market research, we do the dental economics Levin Group annual practice survey, which is about 4,000 random offices of additional data. So the data has been a key part of our DNA in building our consulting processes. Plus, I really enjoy it.
So what do you think has been most valuable? If you had to choose a set of data that has been most valuable in influencing the success of a practice, I mean, if you could just name one or the top one, what would that be?
Well, let me answer you in two ways, and I will answer your question. The answer, the global, universal, broad answer is comparison. Being able to look at top practices, see what they're doing differently by having their reports, their numbers, their data, and then looking at other practices, that are not in the top 10% and seeing how they compare. And comparison is a phenomenal way to understand what creates success, what creates average, and what creates below average. So this is really a fantastic, career study of mine and our group. And I will give you one example. And it goes back to the heart of increasing practice production, which is becoming more important to dentists than ever before. Whenever competition rises, the focus on production and profit goes way up. Yeah. So let's look at one number, just one number out of hundreds of numbers we could look at: patient attrition. Okay, you probably would not have looked at me and said, "Oh, that's the one I'm going to pick."
Oh, but this is great. Oh, good. This is one of those areas. I mean, nobody lectures on, nobody talks about attrition. And I think, I mean, my perspective, if you're trying to grow a practice from year one on, if you're not concerned and thinking about attrition, exactly, you've missed the boat because you can add all you want, but if you have an attrition problem, there's a hole in the bucket.
Exactly. And there are companies that claim that they're going to reactivate all your patients. And you can reactivate a minor percentage, but when someone's gone, they're pretty much gone. It's not hard to find a dentist. All you have to do is close your eyes today, throw a rock, and you'll hit a dental office. So, but nobody is out there saying, "Oh, we'll show you how to reduce attrition." So let's look at that one number. Is that an important number? Well, top 10% practices have an average attrition rate of 6 to 7 to 8%. So let's say 7%. And it's really about 7.2, but I'll skip the decimals for our time. And other practices have an average attrition rate of 14 to 15%. So let's say 14. 14% is obviously double 7%. So most practices lose, 90% of practices lose almost double the number of patients annually versus the top 10%. Now, I've got to add to this discussion because there's more to it. It didn't matter until 2008. Up until 2008, 91% of dental practices grew every year. You've had 1 million clients like we have that said to you, "Well, Jerry, I'd like to work with your company, but I want you to know we've grown every year since I started in my practice." So they're kind of putting you on notice, like, "I'm already doing this really well, but I'm going to let you help me do it better."
Yeah.
After 2008, and for anyone who doesn't know why that year is so important, that's what they call the Great Recession, the longest, deepest recession in the United States. But interestingly, the first recession that ever affected dental practices. We were called recession-proof in all previous recessions. Your portfolio got hit, your stocks went down, but your practice was fine. So dentists were never particularly concerned about recessions. Then 2008 hit, and in many ways, I won't go into it now, reset dentistry or changed dentistry forever. But what happened was many dentists who were losing 14% of their patients never cared because they had enough new patients to make up the difference. First of all, they didn't even know. Nobody measures that statistic the way a good CEO would and should, but it didn't really matter because you had enough new patients to make up the difference. You grew a little bit each year. You made a living. It was a great way to live. In fact, I would even argue, why pay attention to all that when things are going great? And the answer is for when things don't go great. Well, the top 10% practices long before 2008 were already retaining double, their attrition was half of other practices. Now let's take it further. If you pick up 7% per year of a patient base, in 10 years, several things have happened. The obvious thing is you have a 70% bigger patient base than 90% of the other practices. You also have more patients to refer their friends and family to you. You have patients who stay with you longer. So as they get older, they need more dentistry. And it's a multiplier effect where the top 10% can be double or triple everyone else in production and usually profit, because if they're in the top 10%, they're usually well controlled. And based on that, they're the star performers. And a lot of it goes to one simple statistic. Now, that's not the only thing, but here's the main point. Our focus at Levine Group is heavily on increasing practice production. If you take a practice and reduce their attrition by half, simple question, what immediately happens to production? It goes up. Yeah, right. Now it's the 5th year, the 8th year, the 10th year, you start to see amazing things happen. And I also want to mention that the 30-year career of dentists is now the 40-year career of dentists. So you will pick up another 70% plus every 10 years you're in practice if you cut your attrition in half. I wouldn't have known this, and we would not have discovered this as a team here if we weren't studying the data. And one day we're looking at numbers of the top 10% and clients and the reports we're getting and the Dental Economics Levine Group Practice Survey, and we said, oh my God, here's something that is so important that, and by the way, in my seminars, I ask dentists all the time if they know their attrition rate.
Nobody
the
does.
answer, yeah, it's almost 100% no to that question.
Yeah. By the way, I've talked to, and I interviewed this gentleman on my podcast a while back. And I'm going to forget his last name, so I won't bother with the first name. But in 23 years of doing this, interviewing dentists, working with dental practices, I have never, ever had a conversation with anyone like that. He was so concerned about attrition when he had an entire system in place, a process in place. Consequently, he had 14 practices. He's one of the, he's one of the busiest dentists, in the Northeast.
Right.
And he had a process. It was that important. If somebody left, there was a process in place. If somebody called for their x-rays, there was a process in place. And interestingly enough, it always involved him picking up the telephone to make that phone call, to connect with the individual. He said, Jerry, when I do that, you'd be amazed at how many people end up not leaving. I said, well, brilliant. I realize you care. This guy cares about me, right? So I love this conversation because to me, it's fantastically important. So, yeah. So the difference between the 7 and the 14, which is horrendous, that's just a horrendous margin, especially when you look at it from the perspective of if you're losing 15% of your patient base on an annual basis and you're adding only 5% more new patients, you've got a business that's shrinking and is going to just disappear. I mean, that's just simple math.
Exactly.
So what are these practices doing that you've been able to identify that are in that 7% or better range on attrition?
Sure. They do 3 things. And it all comes down to understanding there's no magic bullet. There's no single pearl. We have this Levine Group tip of the day that goes out to 60,000 people Monday through Friday every morning. And the tip is 20 seconds long. And I love our tip and we get great feedback on our tip. But I'm the first one to say, one tip is not going to make your practice. I don't care what that tip is. So the first reason, and again, if you don't have the data, you don't see this. And it was one of the wonderful things in my career is I've seen things I would simply have never seen without the data. So the first thing, and again, these are things that might surprise you. When I say surprise you, you wouldn't have guessed this is what I was going to say.
Sure.
Is patients who leave without an appointment or cancel their appointment or no-show. Any patient who does not have an appointment at Levine Group, we view as an at-risk patient to lose the patient. And you talk about your friend who you interviewed or the gentleman you interviewed. He's a brilliant guy, obviously. We have a total process around any patient that suddenly does not have an appointment. We have a 9-step follow-up process to help that patient get scheduled. Because our rule in life is don't lose a patient. It's too hard to replace them today. And number 2, so number 1 is keep your patient scheduled. The goal of the front desk is nobody leaves without their next appointment. Now we know it's going to happen, but you don't wait for them to call you. That's reactive. You are from a customer service standpoint, you are contacting them. That's proactive. And by the way, your friend called patients who might have been lost. Quick side point, when hygienists call overdue hygiene patients, there's a 5 times greater chance that that patient will schedule than when they get calls from the front desk, because it's their personal provider. So your friend is dead on.
Yeah,
so number one is keep your patient schedule. And we look at that the same way the Ritz-Carlton looks at something called the rebooking rate. At the Ritz-Carlton in Aspen, if they don't have a 91% rebooking rate, people book for the next year before they leave, they fly an executive in to live there until they get it back up to 91%. And they've done this in different Ritz-Carltons all over the world. So we want the practice rebooking rate at 90% or higher. Personally, I like 96, but we want it at 90% or higher. And those 10% don't just lay off the schedule. There's a process to go after them and bring them back in. Number 2 is 5-star customer service. We're in an era now of great competition. And private practice will be fine, but not all private practices. Like in any industry that is competitive, like dentistry, you're going to have winners, average, and losers, unfortunately. And another factor of top 10% is outstanding customer service. And it's not just an accident. It's not just hiring the right people. It's not just about being nice. It is a set of systems and strategies. And when people love the practice and you encourage them to schedule, they synergize, they work together. So those are 2 of the 3. And then the third one is the follow-up, is making sure anyone without an appointment, we call it the 1-day rule. Any patient who is 1 day overdue for an appointment gets a cell phone call that day, and then we follow it up for 9 straight weeks. Now, this is interesting and goes back to data. So I lecture on this, and I can watch my audiences, because I get along really well with my audiences because I'm there to teach and help, and they know that. Yeah. But when I describe 9 weeks of follow-up, you can see a lot of staff members looking at me like, is this stalking? Is this harassment? So I address that by saying it may sound like you're stalking or harassing the patient. We've got to get out of our own comfort zones and do good business. But let's go back to the data. And what the data shows is that the average response time in a general practice to our 9-week follow-up system is 4.1 weeks. So on average, you will get an overdue patient to respond to the follow-up system in approximately 4 weeks. Just in case it's interesting, ortho is 2 weeks. It's actually 2.2 weeks. Why? Because the mother knows the kid's got braces on, they kind of have to come back eventually, so they respond faster. But the data shows that something you might think, oh my God, nine touches in 9 weeks, are you kidding? They're all positive, they're all caring. But I understand why people might balk at that until you realize what the data is showing. And I'll end with this. Our customer service surveying is showing that patients today, especially millennials and the boomers, they want businesses to take care of them. You tell me when you're having an event. You tell me when I need my teeth cleaned. You tell me when I need to go to my physician. Don't make me remember these things. Don't ask me to be responsible for them. I want the business to be responsible for me. Tell me when you're having a sale so I know when to buy. Don't make me call you and say, are you having a sale?
Yeah. I love that. This is just, well, I mean, I feel like you've been in my head for 23 years. This is really cool.
Well, it's fine. We got along very well earlier. So.
Dang it, we should have done this a long time ago. Yep. Looking at this from a different perspective, you have data that drives these decisions, which I love. I've in the past, when I haven't had this kind of data, which it's amazing to have it because it gives credence, I guess, if you will, to what I've always said and trained our members with. I think there's another twist we can put on this to appeal to those who maybe are reticent, fearful. They won't get out of their own way. But I think dentists, and this extends to their teams by default, hygienists, DAs, front office folks, whomever's involved in the practice. I think we have an obligation to be proactive in the care and in the appointing of our patients. I think that's one of our responsibilities as me now as a former dental practice owner, but that was one of the responsibilities that I try to impart on my team is that, hey, they called us initially. Once they've reached out to establish the relationship, it is 100% on us to keep it and to maintain it and to do everything we can, legal, morally, ethically, to keep that relationship intact, because we're talking about their health. And now with these wild and crazy advancements where dentists, here in Oregon, we're going to be giving, apparently dentists are going to be giving measles, mumps, and rubella shots here very soon, polio vaccines, all sorts of things are happening to dental practices. It's become even more important, I think, that relationship be taken really seriously, and not just from a profit and loss standpoint, but from this is our responsibility standpoint.
Right. Well, part of it is, one of the great questions was asked by Peter Drucker. And for those who don't know who Peter Drucker is, he's the greatest management mind that has ever lived. And I often think of him because I had one of the top 10 days of my life was getting to spend a day with him at his home when he was 92 years old. It was the most intimidating experience. You think of like any athlete or celebrity that would intimidate you to meet. And whenever I go to meet people, and the problem was I didn't know I was meeting them. It was a surprise. His periodontist was very friendly with him. And his periodontist was a client of ours and knew that, I'm not sure if it's Drucker God or God Drucker. I never do. But when I flew to California, the periodontist picked me up and said, and I was going out to visit with him anyway and then give a lecture the next day. He said, I've got a surprise for you. And we went to Peter Drucker's home because normally whenever I meet someone, I go prepared. I think it's an honoring of people when you go prepared. And the way I prepare is, what is the one question I would like to ask this person?
Yeah.
I find out I'm at Peter Drucker's home. My mind went totally blank. It was like, I'm meeting a god of mine. And for anybody who doesn't know, he wrote 50 textbooks. And of the 50, if you go to business school, you're going to read 20 or more. I've read every book he's written at least twice. So the reason I bring him up is he was a business guy. He helped make Toyota what it is today. When he died, the number of world-class CEOs and past Fortune 500 and international CEOs who came to his funeral was unbelievable. But as a business guy, to your point, he also wanted to know, how can you do phenomenally well in business and still make a difference for mankind? And I think that's what you're saying. Attrition will make us money if we stop it. That's a good thing. Lower attrition, higher production. And we use words in dentistry like production. It's money.
It's sales. Yeah.
But at the same time, we're doing a good thing for the patient because some of those patients disappear for 5 years. Then they have problems. They don't have a dentist. We're going to see some of that with retail dentistry that's taking place. People will come in for emergencies and they won't think to go back until the next emergency. So being a dentist that cares about the profession and patients, I like what you're saying a lot. I think we have a responsibility to care for our patients, and that means getting them in the door regularly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, this certainly, I wasn't expecting to talk about attrition, so that's a real treat. Very cool. When you mentioned earlier about the top 10%, so you have some specific data in regards to the top 10% and the top 10% of your clients or on the surveys. I'm not sure. Maybe you can clarify that one.
No, these are top 10% practices overall. Some have been our clients, some have not. Okay. But it's a light, I'll call it a study and a fascination, but because you can learn a tremendous amount by comparisons. In other words, if you only look at, certain kinds of practices, that's all you're going to see. So I like comparisons. For example, why are two practices in the same area with the same number of staff, the same number of days, and similar insurance patterns, and one is literally doing double the profitability of another? And I've got that right now. I'll be careful how I say this. but we actually have 6 practices in a unique part of the country. And I want to be a little careful about this. And of the 6, it's almost in a perfect bell curve. 2 are doing poorly, 2 are doing average, and 2 are in this area are knocking the ball out of the park. Now, they're all in similar locations. They're all in similar circumstances. What is the variable that makes the difference? Or variables, and without comparison, you can't figure that out.
Right. Right. Well, and you're right. I've often said it's much more crude than how you've described it. I've often said, give me a practice that's doing really, really well, like top 1% in the nation. Give me a practice that's in the bottom 1% of the nation. And if I switch leadership in those practices,
right.
So I take one doctor out, put him in if I take the poorly performing office, that doctor, put him in the really great performing practice and vice versa. It's a matter of time before the roles are reversed.
I do agree. There are a number of reasons within that, but if you switch the people over time, they'll figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. So what have you noticed? Maybe 2 or 3 examples from either from the comparison of data standpoint or from looking at it maybe on a human resource level.
Sure.
What are some of the differences there that you're seeing? The high performers are this, the ones who aren't doing as well exhibit these traits.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about data. So I'll answer this question using some of what I call the softer side, where you can't necessarily apply data to it. Although there's a guy named Marcus Buckingham out of England who worked with Gallup for years, and he's written some best-selling books, and his expertise, which I enjoy immensely, I just started reading his newest book, is trying to come up with ways to quantify things that can't be quantified, like emotions and moods and attitudes, all in business. But putting that aside, because Marcus Buckingham, unfortunately, will not help most dental practices. There are brilliant minds out there that just don't necessarily apply to dentistry. But let me give you a softer side answer. The first thing we see with top 10% is open mindset leaders. Carol Dweck from Stanford, D-W-E-K, wrote a book called Mindset that anyone would do well to read. And what she showed is that people can change their mindset. But most dentists don't realize they're actually closed mindset people. And that's not a bad thing, but what does it mean? Because they're high IQ and they were willing to do the work, becoming a dentist is a playbook. It's not something we achieve that no one's ever done before. There's an absolute playbook. If you follow the playbook, you may have never thought about this, you will be a dentist. You do well enough in high school to get into college. You do well enough in college and on your dental aptitude test to get into dental school. You work hard enough in dental school to graduate, which almost everyone does, and you're a dentist. And then you get a practice if you have a private practice, and now everything begins to change. Or if you have younger listeners, they may be working for corporate or DSOs or something because they've got huge student loans, which is a very, very serious challenge. But they may eventually have a private practice and they're trying to figure out a career path, but there's no more playbook, and mom and dad, who we often go to, and I think that's a smart thing, are not necessarily able to answer those questions. So the first thing I see with top 10% practices is open mindset leaders. They are willing to be wrong. They are willing to be challenged. They are willing to listen and think outside the box. One of the services we provide, in addition to management consulting, is strategic planning. And usually it's groups of 5 offices or more, because smaller offices typically don't want to pay the freight for or understand strategic planning. And I had the strategic planning group at Levin Group, and I do 6 of them with another person, myself, every year. I still get involved because I never want to lose touch with reality. I love working with dentists, and I love strategy. And we just did one recently, and the leader of this 5-office group was refreshing. He was amazing. They're a top 10% group. He doesn't want to take over the world, but he does want to be the best in their area. He doesn't even want to open more practices, but he wants to buy more and incorporate them. That's what strategy is about. Which way are we going to go?
Right.
And But everything I brought up, his excitement, his enthusiasm, his jumping on it was just a breath of fresh air. He's an open mindset leader, because I brought up many, many things in the planning process that they hadn't thought of or that they needed to change. And he's jumping all over it. So your top 10% dentists are all about being open-minded. Unfortunately, most dentists are what's called closed mindset. And closed mindset can be successful. I don't want anybody to get this wrong, but you can become a dentist with a closed mindset. Just do the work and you'll be a dentist. But what happens is the things that got you there eventually don't work anymore. Everybody has has a strategy that's made them successful that begins to run out. Mine was, I'm 5 feet 8 inches tall and I wanted to be a National Basketball Association center. And I was full size at 12. So I thought I was on my way, and that was the last growth I had. So that didn't work out. So it's a funny example of, my success strategy being full size at 12 did not work after that.
Right.
So so for dentists, a lot are closed-minded. And if you follow a lot of Facebook dental groups, you'll see that they can be positive people, but they're not open mindset, give me all kinds of new ideas. And you see a lot of comments on Facebook, don't do it this way, don't do it that way, you're an idiot, drop all your insurance. And I know they're just comments, but it indicates a closed mindset versus, well, tell me more about that. Explain to me why you did that. How did you make that decision? I love when I'm with people and can have teachable moments where they're asking me a question and I can give them ideas. They can accept them or reject them, but at least they think about them. Those are the people I love working with most.
Right.
So that's number one, open mindset. Number two is continual improvement. A lot of these top 10% dentists, they're just improvement junkies. It's not that they need more money. Some of them want to make more money. As I've always said, we're happy to work with greedy clients. We're happy to work with not greedy clients. That's fine. We don't judge our clients. Whatever your objectives are, our only question is, can we help you achieve them? But it's not necessarily about more money. Money becomes the measure after a while for a lot of people. They're making a lot of money. Or, there are a lot of people in the world, you probably, and many I know, they can retire tomorrow morning, but they're working 75 hours a week because they love this stuff and it fulfills them in some way. So the reality is that these are continual improvement people. They're never satisfied with where they are. Now, they're not dissatisfied. Somebody listening to this will say, well, these are unhappy people. No, these are really happy people, but they're even happier when they find a way to improve themselves. I did last week. I have been a time management fanatic since the middle 1980s. Hiram Smith, the founder of Franklin, and then it became Franklin Quest, then Franklin Covey. I carried a Franklin planner for 25 years. When they took it away from me for a BlackBerry, I think I cried. But I had to get a BlackBerry so that I could communicate the way people were communicating. And, I knew Hiram Smith. I'd met him a number of times. I'm a time management fanatic, Jerry. And I read time management all the time. And I'll be honest, not arrogant. I would like to get better and better because what turns me on is how productive can I be. There isn't all that much new. As you and I were saying earlier, a lot of this stuff was figured out 5,000 years ago or 200 years ago, and you just have to do it well, which I hope I do. But last week I was reading something, and all of a sudden, I'd never thought about this because every Sunday afternoon, I take about 90 minutes and I prepare for the week. And it said, and the reason I think I paid attention, it was 6 billionaires commenting. So all of a sudden, like, if you're a billionaire, I think I'll listen to what you have to say and see if it applies. And one of them said, every Friday, I have a recurring meeting from 4 to 5:30 where all I do is plan for the next week. And I said, that's brilliant. Then I don't have to do that. Not that I mind. I like preparing for the week. But why do it on Sunday afternoon? Or if my wife has something she wants to do, and now I've got this pressure to get ready for the week, because I hate walking in Monday without being ready. I walked in Monday and said to my assistant, would you please put a recurring meeting when I'm in town from 4 to 5:30 on my calendar to prepare for the next week? And if Jerry Jones calls, I'll take his call happily. But, being open to any little levels of improvement is so valuable, I believe. So that's another soft trait that we see with these doctors.
That's brilliant. Like you, I'm a time management junkie. I've read a number of the books, the classics on time management, and I ended up writing a book on time management. I'll send you a copy of it.
I'd like to read.
Anybody that's listening, if you want a copy of the book, just reach out to me and I'll send you a copy of the book. But now I've got to revise it because I just learned something from you. Because in that book, and I don't remember which chapter it is, I'm almost certain that I wrote about plan your week in advance. Sunday's a great time to do it. Sit down, spend at least a few minutes. Just so when you arrive on Monday, your brain has already processed everything that's going to happen for the week when you slept on Sunday night. So now I need to take a look at that and consider revising it. But that's beautiful advice. It's beautiful.
I hope I can. There. That's good.
I love it. I love it. What are some of the other traits? So, you mentioned continuous improvement, or the Japanese word for that's kaizen. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but and then
it's the same way I pronounce it. And that I was trained on kaizen. I say kaizen. That was a big concept in 1980s business. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, Drucker. Yeah, I mean that's where I picked it up from was Drucker. So. And then the open mindset, leadership. And I want to comment briefly on that. If I were to empirically look at my client base, my member base, the most successful of those are the open mindset leaders. I mean, they're ravenous. They're like a golfer. They cannot be satiated with the next I mean, they're always looking for the next best driver, the next putter, is my swing right. They're like a golfer. And I think, to be successful in any endeavor, whether it's on a personal level with your, with a spouse or a friend, you have to be, you have to have an open mindset. And that's, by the way, that's something our politicians could really take a key from on both sides of the aisle, is being a little more open as opposed to closed mindset. So yeah, I love that. What maybe is another trait that you've noticed?
Well, one of the biggest is what you said, it's leadership. And one of the things I've learned is that nobody's born a great leader. It just doesn't happen. We think about great people. Teddy Roosevelt, our past president, there's a fantastic biography called T-Rex. This is a guy that was born with severe asthma. He was a skinny, weak guy that had to lay around a lot. And this goes back to the early 1900s. So you and I were talking about things back then. His father set up a gym on the porch for him. You didn't have gyms all over the country in the early 1900s. And his father said, look, you're in really bad shape, but I think you can do this. Start working out. And the guy went on to build a phenomenal physique, meaning he was endurance. He built muscle. He was the Rough Rider, but he would have never gotten there otherwise. And by the time he hit 20, the asthma was gone, and the rest of the story. So, but in his life, because of this, he could handle resilience incredibly well. But he wasn't born a great leader, and nor are most people. So what I see in top 10% practices is these dentists focus on leadership. And by being good leaders, they're not perfect. They're no perfect leaders. They build a great team. And they don't build a great team because they're geniuses at hiring great people. I actually believe it's really hard to hire great people. And if you do, you just got lucky. When I was at Harvard Business School taking a course, and the instructor was lecturing on interviewing techniques. And he said, by the way, if you are the single best interviewer in the world, you'll get it right about 50% of the time. So, just a brilliant insight that's always been with me. So the third of 4 key traits, and I'll give you the fourth one in a second, that we see with top 10% leaders is a lifetime study of leadership. And they also act to be the example. They develop their own style. That it's not true that you have to be a certain type of leader. There are an infinite number of leadership styles. In fact, rarely do I see 2 people that are exactly the same. But these leaders help the people around them to rise to higher levels. And they delegate everything they can. Part of their improvement is getting rid of everything that they can give to someone else, allowing them to do what they do best in the best interest of the practice. And the fourth one, if you don't mind, I'll share with you, because it may actually be the most important. Although if you don't have an open mindset, you'll never have this. It's very simple. They surround themselves with experts. When I look at top 10% performing dentists, we are often not the first consultants they've ever hired. They've got great attorneys, great financial planners, great estate planners, great accountants. And by the way, one tip I'll give your listeners: hire experts that know dental. We are not like everybody else. It's not that we're so unique compared to the world, but dentistry is an industry. If you don't know the potential income of a dentist, if you don't know the lifespan of a dentist, if you don't know the challenges of a dentist, a lot of business people say, oh, well, dentists are stupid business people. There's nothing stupid about any dentist. In most cases, the dentist has the higher IQ. They're untrained, but the bottom line is it really doesn't matter because they have no time to do it anyway. And I can give you an example of an industry that's never made progress in dentistry. It's a genius tool that nobody uses. So what we see with these top 10% is they don't hesitate to spend money or fly to places or hire people who they think can help them. Last year, we had a dentist, 31 years old, fly to Baltimore from California just to meet us before he hired us. He got on a plane. He got here the night he came in on a red eye. He spent 3 hours with us, which was completely unnecessary, by the way, but not for us, not for him, just
Right.
to make sure we were the right firm for him. And we've had an incredible relationship ever since. But that's not something I'm saying everybody needs to do. It's an example of, and he's already built a very, very nice practice, and it will only get better. And you should hire your experts. You should find mentors. But remember, mentors don't get up in the morning worrying about how to make your life better. You have to honor them by being prepared, by appreciating them. They're people, and I do some of this, that will help you just because they want to. But they want to because they like you and they know you appreciate it. So you get your experts, you get your mentors, and be careful. I'll tell this to your listeners. There are other dentists who can help you, but be careful. Just because you're friends with other dentists doesn't mean they can help you, because by definition, the top 10%, only 10% of the profession is in that. So
Yeah.
if you want to be there, you need to find other top 10% dentists. A lot of times I'll introduce a client to another client because I think they'll have an interesting time talking to each other. So those are the 4 traits that I see on the soft side. We can't really measure it, but after 36 years, I can tell you those are the traits that make a difference.
Yeah, I see these as you're going through these. They mimic my thoughts. I hadn't enunciated them or categorized them in any real fashion. More of just when I see it, I recognize it. And generally, when in the first 10 minutes on the phone, probably 5 minutes on the phone, maybe less, I can peg where a doctor fits. Do they have the potential based on where they're at right now, or is there some head work that we need to do, right? Because oftentimes you got to clear the head trash out if we're going to make real progress, because there's so many preconceived notions that are stuck in there. I want to spend a moment on something, on one word that you said that I believe can so greatly impact a solo practitioner, the owner of a group. It doesn't really matter, but to me, it had such tremendous impact when not when I just heard it, but really when I was able to see the value in doing it, and that's delegation. Most solo practitioners are solo, and sometimes because they want to be, other times because they haven't mastered delegation. So delegation of all sorts, delegation of responsibilities of patient care. I know you've had that conversation with 1,000 dentists who's like, I don't know if any other dentist can take care of my patients as well as I do. So there's an issue with delegation, right?
Right.
How, from your experience and your time in teaching and working with dentists, how do you get, or what are some, maybe some tools or techniques that doctors who are challenged with delegation, in other words, they're doing it all, they're doing payroll, in which they shouldn't be. They should be reviewing it and signing the checks, but not doing it. There's all these little tasks that just eat away at you in a dental practice. I'll give the example in my office. I obviously I didn't do anything with patient care. I was only concerned about the outcome. Is the patient happy? Will they refer? That was my ultimate measure. It's a very simple measure. So my focus was really on retention and attraction of new patients, and some on, the HR side. Everything else was delegated. And the HR was only, really to hire leaders. And then the rest I left to the leaders. So it was very limited in HR. But what are some of the techniques or maybe your strategies, tools that you could offer or maybe just review to give some of our docs that are listening that are challenged with delegation?
So that is such a great question. And I've actually built a model around it. So I'll share the model with you as a starting point. And I call it level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 leaders, or the real name is level 4 leadership. And this is not the Jim Collins good to great levels. That's a whole, Jim is he's the most brilliant business mind of our era, but this is not out of good to great, which is one of the books, again, that everybody should read and study. A level 1 leader is typically it's a younger dentist or someone who recently took over a practice. They're often in debt. They're struggling. They're trying to make it go. They're trying to build a practice. Now, if they bought a practice, the practice is probably, they call it a going concern. It's probably doing well, even though they may not be making a lot of money due to debt and investment. But level 1, you're just going to work your backside off like any entrepreneur. Dentists often think they're entrepreneurs. We're not. An entrepreneur, in my definition, is someone who does something that's kind of never been done before. There's a twist on it. There's a change. It could be, Steve Jobs was an entrepreneur with something brand new, but a lot of entrepreneurs are just doing things a little bit differently. Dentists actually should do a lot of things similarly once they know the right way to do it. So entrepreneurs work endless hours. They're a startup. I joke, they live out of pizza boxes. That's what builds a young company. I'm not suggesting young dentists need to do that, but I am suggesting that if you think you're going to come into the profession, take over a practice, build a practice, work 31 hours a week, and then do nothing else for your practice the rest of the week, you're living on fantasy island. So most success-oriented young dentists I know, they've got a plan in their mind, good plan, bad plan, and they're working. They don't need to work 70 hours a week, but they're not going to make it on 31 hours a week either, unless they're just an employee. Level 2 is where the practice starts growing. You're starting to make money. You can put some away. You can fund retirement. You can do all those smart, classic things that your advisors would tell you to do. You're adding to your patient base, even if you have a high attrition rate, and things are going pretty well. And then you get to level 3. And level 3 is a great place to get to and a lousy place to stay. At level 3, you've got a successful practice. It's doing well. It's stable. You're making a living. By the time these levels kind of track with age a lot, and a lot of dentists are getting started later because they're working as employees for a few years to pay back some debt. And now you're married and you've got kids and you've got a house and you've got soccer and you've got Little League and other activities. And level 3 is where most dentists stay. This is the end of their career path with the hope and belief that the practice will stay the way it is today. And if it would, it's not a bad life, but it's nowhere near your potential. Level 4 leaders, which most dentists don't get to, I define as when the dentist does nothing except what the dentist excels at. Level 4 leaders focus on doing what they do best and nothing else. And if you look at the most successful people in the world, that's pretty much what they do. Warren Buffett, who's a fantastic study, forget trying to study his investing. Nobody else can do what Warren Buffett does. That's a myth. But if you study Warren Buffett's life, it's a phenomenal study in how to live a great life. Warren Buffett doesn't do anything except investing in own companies. Steve Jobs didn't really do anything except technology. He had Apple, he had Pixar. Bill Gates, software. I mean, you don't see Bill Gates buying, while he was CEO, buying baseball teams. Bill Allen, his partner, bought sports teams, but he was retired with billions of dollars. Yeah. When you look at the most successful people in the world that are still actively working, for the most part, they're only doing one thing, what they excel at. Because the truth is, Jerry, most of us only excel at about one thing. Well, what's a dentist excel at? Dentistry. So if we can build the practice and delegate sufficiently so that we walk in the morning, we attend the morning meeting, we don't run it. The staff runs the office the rest of the day. The assistants run the doctor. We leave at the end of the day hitting our daily goal. That's a fantastic day. And by the way, you're not stressed. You're not tired. The staff work with each other to handle whether they can put in an emergency or all these questions they've seen 4,000 times and they're still asking the doctor's permission. And these are the most successful practices on the planet, because where's the doctor during all this? Producing and having a great time. So level 4 doctors are the happiest, most successful doctors in our profession. And by the way, they reach a point. Here's the interesting thing. What annoys them is when people ask them things that they don't want to be asked. And we have trained them with questions, how to look politely at a team member and say, that's a great question, but why are you asking me? Or that's a great question, what do you think we should do? Those momentary teachable moments that also says, you don't need to ask me. Make a decision. The other thing about these leaders, they accept that team members will get things wrong. Mm-hmm. Because one of the great leadership principles that I've learned, I didn't learn this in school, is other people will do a great job, but they won't do it the same way that I would have done it. And if you don't overcome the way I would have done it syndrome, you're done. You've just plateaued in your life. You're maxed out. And you've got to let people make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes, but those mistakes are growth opportunities, not mistakes.
Yeah. So you wrapped up with closed mindset leadership. That's a closed mindset leadership. I mean, you can't be a level 4 leader if you have a closed mindset.
No, you absolutely can't, because you said it. They've got to be in the middle of everything, or the whole practice will fall apart.
Yeah. To me, that the greatest compliment that I could have given myself. Now, don't take that the wrong way. that didn't come out right. I guess the greatest accomplishment in my own eyes about what I had done was when I leave town on vacation, or maybe I'm going to be on a business trip for a while. If I leave for a week and I don't get a phone call, and all I get is a fax of, here's our day sheets, here's new patients, here's, who left today. If that's all I get, then I have a successful business. If I have to be in the middle of it, that's the wrong, I don't have a business. I have a job. I don't want a job. I've got plenty of those. So, that's to me, that is exactly what you're saying, is a dentist should be producing. If you took the owner out and stuck another dentist in, there should be no difference. Right. The team should be able to just plow right along.
Well, this will help your listeners, because, dentists, I've noticed, and I'm one of them, and maybe it's just human nature. We like to try to learn from, billionaires and Fortune 500s and things that some applies, some doesn't. Mm-hmm. So Jim Collins tells the story, the author of Good to Great, that he was brought into a company, and he didn't name the company, that had 1,000 employees, a very, very successful company founded by an absolute genius. And the genius was the CEO. And he said to him, Jim, tell me how to improve my company. And they're talking, and Jim is just, absolutely brilliant. And he finally looked at the guy. He said, you don't have a company. And the guy looked back at him, 1,000 employees, very successful, very profitable. The guy looked back and said, what do you mean I don't have a company? He said, well, you are a genius with 1,000 followers, but you don't have a company. And the day that you are no longer here, or you are no longer a genius, is the day this company will fold, because you have 1,000 followers who have no idea how to run this company if you're not here. And the question is whether you want to turn this into an organization, or you just want to be a genius with 1,000 followers. So my point to dentists is, when I heard that story, it resonated with me. A lot of dentists are a genius with 7 followers, 20 followers, 30 followers. But if you take the dentist away for a week, who knows what would happen? And if that's the way anybody feels, then you need to take the steps to build the systems in your practice so that that practice runs you. You don't run the practice.
Yeah. I mean, drop the mic and we're done right there. That was awesome. I want to go back to So level 4. So Dan Sullivan, I'm sure you know who Dan Sullivan is. He's a consultant, real brilliant guy, based out of Toronto, I believe. I have a lot of friends that have taken his course or his consulting. Um, I don't know what to call them really. They're a series of courses you take over a period of time, and you're involved in a mastermind group. And been very productive for him. I personally haven't been involved with him at all, but one of the things that comes out of that is almost immediate in the very first couple of meetings is you have to find, identify, and then focus on your unique ability. So it's exactly what you just said. It's you and I we have one thing that we, frankly, really are great at. The rest of the stuff we can do, but we're not great at it. And I think, for dentists that find what that unique ability is, whether it's, hey, I can whip out a crown in no time. And, here I'm doing, why am I doing implants? I mean, realistically, you need to take a look at even the service mixture that you're offering, because maybe you shouldn't be doing implants or ortho. Maybe you should be doing dentures, because maybe you are the single greatest dentist ever to do dentures, and you can whip them out and you have legions of happy patients. So I think looking at that unique ability from a number of standpoints is very smart. And again, if I look at my mix of members and clients, the ones who have identified their unique abilities, or ability rather, have just flourished. And one of them, frankly, it isn't dentistry. He realized that, hey, I'm a great leader, and I know how to pick the right people and put them in the right spot. Consequently, I mean, this guy's sitting on an absolute fortune, a number of practices, and he's got a big giant mansion on Lake Michigan. So he found his unique ability and ran with it and stuck with it, rather than trying to be adapting every kind of thing that comes along and being everything to everybody. He just said, hey, this is what I'm really great at. I'm great at building teams. I'm going to build 2 teams, and I'm just going to run with that. And he found dentists to do the work that are phenomenal dentists. So I really like that conversation, because you can't go wrong in that process. Find it, and it might not be dentistry. So you and I both know dentists who practice for a short period. Well, I mean, you practice for 10 years. Now, if your unique ability was being a clinician, you'd probably still be practicing if that was just your first love, but it's been something else, right? It's been consulting and business. It's been studying leadership and, studying what makes companies really successful. So, God, just right on the money. I have so many more questions. I could go for a long time, but I don't want to keep you too awful late. We've been going for a while now, and it's just been very productive. How would you feel about coming back in the future and we have another conversation? Because I know there's some important stuff we didn't cover.
Jerry, I've enjoyed this tremendously. I'd be thrilled to come back and do more with you. This has been
Good.
Really fun. And I knew it would be, and it exceeded expectations. So getting to know you has been a pleasure.
Well, same here. It's been a lot of fun, and I think we've covered just some really great points and plenty for our listeners to chew on and really evaluate in their own practices and their own lives. And then next time around, when we come back, maybe in a few months, we can hit a couple of other topics, because I'd really love to get into, for example, the top 3 things that you do in practices and consulting to raise those practices up and build great businesses for these doctors. So, gee whiz, that's a whole nother hour and a half that we could spend on that. So, before we wrap up, any last minute thoughts or information you'd like to share with our listeners to help guide them maybe to learning more about the Levin Group and what you're doing to help dentists?
Well, first of all, the one thought I would leave with all your listeners is you've got amazing potential. We find, and this is statistically now proven with data, that most practices have a growth potential of 30 to 50%, even when they think they're maxed, without adding any hours. I think what scares a lot of dentists is they think, well, to do better, I've got to work more hours or work harder. We've seen endless practices grow 30 to 50%. By the way, that's a 3-year growth number. We used to be able to do that in 1 or 2 years. It's now 3 years,
Sure.
But 30 to 50% potential. So don't sell yourselves short. I was at another Harvard business course recently, and the speaker was talking about turnarounds. And a lot of practices don't realize they're going to go through ups and downs today, growth years, decline years. And in business, the big companies, a turnaround is 5 to 7 years. So practices should not give up realizing they've got a 30 to 50% growth potential from wherever they are today, minimally. In terms of Levin Group, as we said, I didn't come here to sell anything at all, but you can go to our website, levingroup.com. What would I do? I'd sign up for our free tip of the day because I love the tip of the day. By the way, I dictate the tip. I do 10 tips every day on my way in every morning. They're 20 seconds long. A great idea is to kick off your morning meeting with reading the tip out loud to get this habit of, hey, the day's starting, let's get going, let's be positive. Some are on management, some are on marketing, some are on leadership, some are motivational, and we're always adding new ones. And it's not a solicitation site. So anybody you want that wants to sign up, it's free, and they're more than welcome to. After that, they can look at the website and contact us at any time if there's something we can talk about.
Great. I think anybody who's not on your tip of the day, it's just crazy. I mean, especially what you see, who you talk to, the wisdom you've shared just in this interview, it's phenomenal. So definitely just go and get on the list. Absolutely. So
we're doing something you would like because you're the marketing expert, and your clients, want to add patients. So we're going to begin branding this free 30-minute conference with doctors who want to talk about their unique situations. So that's certainly available to any of your listeners as well.
Awesome. Okay, great. Good. Fantastic. Well, Doctor, I appreciate your time. And for our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all of your time. I respect it dearly. And I know you have options to be doing other things instead of listening or watching. So I really appreciate it. And thanks for joining us. And until next time, we'll catch you soon. And we'll have Dr. Levin back. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.